Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Unexpected Advice. Today, I am joined by Tom Dardick. He is the CEO of The Mentor Machine, a co author of science fiction, and a former COO of a manufacturing company. He's got a lot of varied and interesting backgrounds. He also hosts a podcast that's called Eye of Power. It has over 200 episodes and thousands of followers. But as you already know, that's not what we're going to talk about. Today, we're going to sit down with Tom and we're going to talk about failure. And this is something that's near and dear to my heart, Tom. It's something that I think everyone struggles with it. And I think your background and how you grow up particularly affects that as well. So I'm excited to talk to you about this subject. So thanks for
Wonderful.
coming.
Thanks for having
Yeah,
me, Esther. I'm looking forward to it.
excellent. So let's start with the most obvious question. This is the most obvious question in my mind is when you think about the failures you've experienced in your life, what first comes to mind? What kind of came to mind for you?
Well, it's nice to be known as an expert failure in the world, right?
Hey, as long as
Nothing
I
but
can make money at it, I guess it's okay.
I've done nothing but fail my whole life. Yeah. And when you think about the word failure, most people will react like, "Oh my gosh, that's a negative thing." And obviously it is because the word means you tried and you didn't do what you tried to do. But what it ignores is the iterative and learning curve of what life actually is. So no matter what it is that you're doing, riding a bike is the classic example. You're not going
Mhm.
to get on the bike and do tricks and be a fantastic bike rider. You're going to fall off that bike. So you're
Right.
going to fail over and over and over. Does that mean you're never going to be a bike rider? You're never going to do anything no matter what you do? No, you've got to go through the stage of being incompetent until you do it enough so that you can be competent. And
Yeah.
it's one level that's even more complicated than that, which is at first, we're sort of unconsciously incompetent because we don't even know enough to even know what good is.
Okay.
So then we try it for a while. We realize, oh my gosh, I stink at this. And so now we're consciously incompetent.
Uh-huh.
So then we keep going, and pretty soon we get the hang of something, and then we can be
Yeah.
consciously competent. And then we do it enough, and then we can finally get it into muscle memory and be unconsciously competent. So that's the building
Yeah.
blocks of failure. But really, when we talk about the kind of failure that's the drama that we're going to sort of cry to our loved ones about or anything like that, it's the big things, right? It's you started a company and it didn't work out. You failed at a job and got fired. You got dumped by your significant other. These things feel like the end and a disaster and some sort of thing that is wrong. And so that's
Yeah.
where the negative comes in. Um, and I don't want to say that there's no negative. We all are disappointed when things don't go our way. So it's not like it's a rosy picture. But there's no path in life that doesn't include failure, so you might as well
Mhm.
embrace it. You might as well say this is just part of the journey.
Yeah.
So, I've had a number of what I would call failures, but I wouldn't change them. I wouldn't go back and have it not have happened.
I guess this is the difference between living with regret
Yeah.
and learning from the experience.
Yeah. It couldn't have been any different than it was because you were a different person then.
Yes.
So
Yes.
you did with the best you knew how at the time. You're different now. So
Yeah.
you want to make sure your metrics are lined up properly on that. But I have one kind of very spectacular failure in my work life
Oh,
where
do tell. We all want to hear. Everybody likes everyone else's drama. We don't want to deal with it
I
ourselves,
mean
but we'll take yours.
it's kind of a long saga, but I'll cut it to the major points.
I'll get the popcorn. Hold on. I'm just kidding.
My brother and I acquired a company, and my father was involved too as more advisory. But my brother and I were the main drivers of we had a dealership for this company, and we ended up buying the company because they wanted to get out of this division they were in, and we didn't have a lot of money, so we went to our resources, and we had a company that specialized in situations like we were in and said, "Look, we'll get you a bridge loan, and then while we're getting the bridge, we'll get the contract going. While we're doing that, we'll get you investors, get it all squared away, and then we'll be solvent and operational." So that sounded good to us. We were ready to go
Right.
and wanting to go strong. So we went ahead.
Yeah.
That broker ended up taking a powder, went away. So we're stuck with this loan. and $1 million worth of paper that we owe. We have an operation. We have 30 employees. We have customers. We're going, but we don't have any kind of operational margins at all, where everything's tight, everything's a compromise. We were able to last for 3 years.
Wow.
We had a deal, actually a handshake deal that probably would have saved it, but it turns out that was a company called Executone. They had a spectacular failure of their own, and the entire management team got canned over it. Well, when they got canned, any agreement they had was canned as well, and that included us. So we lost
Oh,
that. That
wow.
would have taken our sales from 2 people to 600 people as a sales force.
Wow.
So that would have been a pretty good deal for us, but
Huge.
didn't happen. We ran out of money and we went down that spiral, the negative spiral, where you make a compromise, another compromise. You know you want to do something, but you can't. So you do the best you can. And
Mm,
it's just this horror trail of it's over, but you just have to keep going, and it's a
yeah.
nightmare. And so that was in the
Yeah.
90s. Now the reason we didn't get money is because in the late 90s, those of you who remember what the investment
Yeah.
profile was back then, what was really hot? It was the
I'm
dot-com bubble.
manufacturing.
It was the
Yeah.
dot yeah. Well, we were a manufacturer. We were a brick and mortar,
Yeah.
family kinda owned thing that was very non-sexy at the time, and, we couldn't find investors in that time frame, and the name of the company was Darcom. So if it was, everyone told us, if it was Dar.com, we'd get you as much money as you want, but it was a very dry thing. So anyway, ended up losing that company, and that nightmare was the best education I could have possibly had. Now, it took me when you're
Wow.
in the middle of these things, you don't know
Yep.
how twisted around you are. You think you're just going through life and everything's fine and you're coping. Only in retrospect, in the rearview mirror, do you know how really devastated you are. And so it took me a couple years after that to kind of get reset to zero. So it's not like I would say
Yeah.
it's good for people to have these kinds of things happen to them at all. But the fact
Sure.
it did happen to me changed my perspective and has made me a much better thought partner to the people that I serve than I otherwise would have been. I can't really
Right.
put a price on that. So,
Yeah. No, it's an incredible that's an incredible story, and I appreciate you sharing with it because not a lot of people are willing to say, "This is what I did. It didn't work." And I remember the first time that I really had an experience where I didn't do the job as well as I think I should have, and there was a lot of reasons for it. But in a way, to your point, there's certain decisions we make, and then there's other things that we can't affect. Like we can't affect what happens to us, control how we respond to that, but I can't
yeah.
affect that someone else made a failure and the whole team that I made the agreement with got canned. That wasn't there's no way nothing you could have done to change that or to
Well,
make that different.
kind of yes, kind of no. As it turned out, and I don't want to throw my brother and my father under the bus, but the 3 of us were sort of in control, and whenever we generally agreed on most things, but whenever there was a disagreement, it was almost always those 2 saw the same way, and I was the one who didn't. And I had a very good friend from college who was a very brilliant guy. He still has a company to this day. His clients have been, fund managers. So he advises the people who advise people. And so he's really brilliant, and he was helping me along the way. And he said, what you really need to do, Tom, is you need to cut your overhead. So you have to cut a bunch of your processes, outsource everything. We had a 9,000 square foot facility. He said you should have a 3,000 square foot facility and
Yeah.
10 or 12 employees, and that's it. And had we listened to that advice, we
Mm,
probably would have been able to pull it out. But my brother and my father thought, no, we're trying to be attractive to investors. So all these things, all these processes look attractive to them. And my friend says, no, the cash flow is what people are going to look at. So
right.
we just didn't see it eye to eye. So the point is that we might have been able to save that. It wasn't a done deal that we couldn't have, but we just made too many mistakes.
Yeah. Yeah. And that sometimes happens. So I'd be really curious to dive into a little bit about your advice to people that are going through this. So we can start with like the folks that are in it right now, they find themselves in the midst of failure. And I think a lot of times we don't define what failure will look like. And when I'm talking to clients about projects, one of the things I like to bring up is what would failure look like?
Yeah.
Because if we can identify it, that as we're going through the pathway, just as you're kind of in hindsight, see, oh, if we would have changed this, if we would have done this, if we would have made these decisions a little differently by defining failure early on, hopefully you can get a bit of a roadmap to see where that route's going and either choose to end, like, all right, throw in the towel now before I lose, my health over this, or to say we're going to divert, we're going to change our behaviors to get to that next point. So I think definition is really important. Advice would you give to people who are in the midst of like and maybe even realizing like, oh, this isn't going the way it's supposed to be going?
Well, some of what you said is I think my answer is sort of in your question there, where you iterate and you make sure that you are
Mm,
not trying to jump from sea level
mhm.
up to the top of Mount Everest. You have a plan to get to base camp 1. So in other words,
Okay.
you iterate. You go for
Yeah.
what you can do that, learn along the way, because in my experience, most things take longer than you think they're going to when you're making these big plans. And then there's things that come up that you didn't think about. So you have to have some leeway in that thought process in order to have strong iteration, but really cut it into more bite-sized chunks. Then the other thing that you brought up in your question there, Esther, is the idea of, okay, what does failure look like? What are the
Yeah.
non-negotiables? When you're in failure, it can be hard to see. We get into
Yeah.
crisis mode, we get into lockdown mode, and so our vision of what's possible shrinks. Our confidence in what we're able to do takes a huge hit. And so we tend to shrink in stature. Our agency doesn't go
Oh.
forward, it goes backwards. So it does become this sort of cycle. And our framing of things matters for that reason, because if we
Mhm.
think we are the problem and that we will never fill in the blank, then that creates a negative loop that can at least make our failure loop longer. And we can
Mm.
shorten it by simply taking stock in the things that we actually have control over, and then getting excited about the lessons that we can apply from that experience.
That's really brilliant, and I think that fits really well into the defining. So it's like maybe you didn't define the failure at the beginning, but defining it like this isn't going, something's happening, and maybe those are triggers. There's sometimes I think there's triggers physically for ourselves, or sometimes economically, cash flow, right? That's a good economic trigger and metric. But sometimes it's an internal metric of the stress level or the things that aren't going well, or the relationship or the arguments or the distance or whatever it might be in our lives that are triggers. And having that agency, I love that concept of having that agency to say this isn't, something's not right. Let's take stock rather than I'm going to continue pushing and try to figure it out. And just, I have to keep on going
Mm.
because I've already invested so much.
In writing, William Goldman, that was famous, writing book specifically for screenplays, but it applies to all creative endeavors, including business. You have to kill your darlings, is what he said. And the pr
So
and yet
hard.
you gotta kill your darling. So in other words, you have this great idea, you have this thing,
Yeah.
but you have to realize that it's only valuable in the context of the whole.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
your best lines might end up on the editing, in the editing room. Your
Right.
best scene might
Yeah.
never make the final cut of the movie. And it's
Yes.
like it's heartbreak. It's one of the things whenever you're in an artistic endeavor, it's one of the things that's the hardest lesson to
Yes.
learn.
I will never forget the first time I was editor of a newspaper in college, and I'll never forget the advisor after I was written some material. He said, I want you to take all of your emotions, all of your feelings, and I want you to set them aside. Are you ready to begin? And he edited my copy in front of me. And it was so painful. It was like red ink, blood everywhere. But it makes you a better it makes you a better writer. It makes you better. Let's just start that. And something I will say in the hopefulness of that, yes, you sometimes you have to kill your darlings, but sometimes you don't kill them, you just put them on the shelf. So when I think of having to kill that mentally, I think a lot of times of putting it on the shelf, because there have been times when I thought, oh, I have that thing on that shelf from 10 years ago. Just going to take that and bring that forward again because it is a good idea. It wasn't the right time for it or the right space for it. And again, in the whole, it didn't make sense, but now it does. So
Yeah, maybe.
sometimes
Yeah, go ahead.
I put it on the shelf.
Well, and maybe Goldman should have said, "You have to shelve your darlings."
And it feels like killing them, though. I mean, it
It
does
does.
sometimes. And sometimes you have to I will say this because eventually your basement does get full. Granted, sometimes it goes away. And sometimes you have to be willing to let go of it to it never go back to it. So it has to go onto the shelf that might never be visited again. But at the same time, for me mentally,
Well,
sometimes
yeah.
I'm like, let's put it over here.
You gotta have a world-class filing system so you can find things again, because I don't know about
Yes.
you, but everything just sort of gets lost, so I tend to just be in the moment. But we've been iterating a lot as a team lately, and I'll generate a lot of ideas and content. I'll bring it in front of the
Yeah.
team, and I don't want this to be the Tom Dardick show. I want this to be the mentor machine. So I'm welcoming, and, they come up with ideas, and I'm happy. I don't it doesn't have to be me that comes up with I don't want it to
Right.
be me, really. I
Yeah.
want it to be us. So
Yeah. Yeah. As long as you're willing to let them die or go on the shelf or not be used
exactly. I
and then move
mean,
on.
you relegate them to where they can shine the most. That's true with our
Yeah.
people in our roles too, in organizations. You
Yeah.
talk about alignment. It's very true. I mean, somebody who's great over here or stinky over here could be the opposite in
Yeah.
another seat.
Yes.
We have to be careful about how we label things, because it's very easy to fall into the sunk cost fallacy problem where we are invested. So, I've been with this person for 3 years. If I cut it now, that's 3 years down the drain. Well, that's one way of looking at it, but that'll get you another 3 years wasted too, right?
Yeah.
So the way to look at it is, these are my standards. This is what I'm going to accept or not going to accept. Can this be brought into that frame or not? And that's the
Yeah.
question that you answer. And if no, and then you say, okay, well, answering can it be, you put out a plan to get to base camp one. And if the other person in a relationship framework says, okay, let's try that, then you have something to go on. If they don't, then you have clarity. There's nothing to talk about.
Right.
So
Right.
so really it's a matter of how you're framing both what failure and success look like. And
Yeah.
you might not have a specific picture, but you know what you don't want.
Yes. At least you can define that. And it reminds me, I was talking to a friend of mine who had made a hire and the person had come highly recommended. And I know a lot of hiring managers are like, oh, yes, you've had this experience where you hired that person. I've had this experience. You hire someone, you think they're going to work out great, and then you have to let them go because of lack of performance. And it's so painful. And we hang on for so long sometimes. My friend was she was telling me how long she was hanging on to the point where the recruiter she had worked with was finally like, it's your business. You have to make this decision. So even like she was even saying, you've got to let this go, and you let it go. You just, well, we'll hang on forever. We don't want to hurt people's feelings or blah, blah, blah. But you failed. We've got to recognize it for what it is.
This is a classic trap that managers and executives fall in. Whenever I go into an organization, I always ask, who's boss around here? What's the top priority? And people will say, okay, it's the CEO, or some people say it's the customer, their immediate boss, whatever. And it's always the organization itself, because without that being whole and healthy and vibrant, nobody has anything. So it's the central core organizing principle and mechanism that is actually the thing that everybody needs to orient around. So whenever we get off of that, well, I like this person, or this person has these
Mhm.
good qualities, so we don't want to hurt their feelings, or we can live with these other things, and then you compromise the as soon as you start
Yeah.
compromising the organizational integrity of how the thing's going to function and align, now you're really not doing anybody, including that person's, you're not doing anybody any favors. So,
Yeah.
you kind of have to be enamored of tough love. And the tough part is you're uncompromising as it relates to the integrity and health of the organizing principle.
Right. Right. And I think these are great tips, like really, really practical tips for anyone in management or an organization that's having to even think through how they create those operations. I'm really curious in your experience with walking through failure and the hindsight, you've taken it's years now that you've had time to process. What are some of the key things that you learned that you have been able to recognize in the future? Like, so I recognize this. Oh, I know where this goes. We're not going there.
Yeah, you have to be careful with the lessons you learn too, because
Okay.
you have to be able to tell the difference between something that's situational or universal. So
Oh, yeah.
that takes a little bit of discernment. So I'd say always work things out with other people. And now we have the benefit of AI, and AI can be a wonderful accelerator. It could also get you into loops. So you have to be careful with
Mm,
how you use that. It'll probably get better and better. It is getting better. I can notice a big
right.
difference as we go. But it's very important to make sure that you're not fixing your old problem with a new tool, right? So because
Yeah, talk more about that. Explain what you mean by that.
sure. So what I mean by that is, let's just take my example that I shared with the companies. I might easily fall into the thing where everything's got to be lean, and you have to make sure that you're flush with cash. And otherwise, you're going to lose your company. And if I just took those two lessons and applied them everywhere, it probably wouldn't work in a lot of different situations. So
Right.
it's not that's a situational, not a universal.
Yeah.
So that would be an example. And I also don't want to give our audience the idea that that was my only failure. I've failed my whole every day.
Oh,
We're kind of winning and losing, right? So
we are. We are winning and losing. And why is it so Tom, why is it so hard? Why
well,
is it so hard for us to admit that, to make this and to embrace it? And I've seen really successful
oof,
people who are embrace this and they're so much more successful for it, or that say, yeah, I'm going to work harder until I succeed. Like I experience that failure as just an indicator, but it's so we internalize it and it creates identity within us. What's going on? What's
again,
going on?
you're answering the question in your question in a way, but you've hit the real core of it. So another brilliant question by you, Esther. I'm noticing this is a pattern whenever I talk to you. But no, what it is it. I mean, the word that we use is ego. And what is ego? As soon as I say that, what comes to your mind? Because we need ego. Ego kind of gets a bum rap. It's like, oh, that person has a huge ego, and we say that like it's a criticism. And what we really mean is they're not in touch with what their ego's function is, and they have a they shut down because how does the ego function? So the ego is the part of us that keeps us safe in society. It's like the bumper that keeps our stock up in the eyes of other people in a way. And the ego functions this way. It wants to be, its job is safety and security. So number one, it's protect, protect, protect.
Mhm.
Number two, what's safety and secure? The known. So it
Right.
wants to be certain, knowledgeable, sure, taking everything into account, discounting threat. It wants to be like right and doesn't want to be challenged. So these are the things that it's keeping us safe in a way, but then it's opening us up to danger in the other way if we don't understand what its role is. So
Mm.
that's what you
Mhm.
were pointing to in that question.
Yes. So it affects the way I think it, and to summarize in a way that I've heard it or I think through it is around that social status. So we have this status, and so if I expose my failure, if I'm failing, people have a particular perception of me potentially. I also find that as I've embraced it and said, I didn't do a good job, I failed at this, I learned from it, that knowledge and that authenticity and the willingness to be exposed in that way creates so much more trust. So it has the opposite effect if you actually state it and you put it out in the open and
That's
become authentic
exactly
about it.
right. Because what's really the antidote, again, you're pointing to another great insight with that, which is the antidote is humility, right? The antidote is the admission that what you know is a drop in the bucket or the ocean compared to what there is to know, which means that no matter how expert you are, how experienced you are, how many times you've tried this, doesn't matter. You still see just a slice of what deeper reality actually is. Even the
Right.
most amazing expert can be completely stupid about a lot of things. So,
Right.
I mean, to me, one of the great examples is Elon Musk. I mean, he's unbelievable achievements, world-changing achievements, and then unbelievably cockamamie things at the same time. So
Yeah.
it kind of shows you that nobody, no matter how smart you think you are, how much experience you have, you just see what you see. You're just a person. And that requires some humility. And then you have to remember that the ego serves you, but if you identify with the ego, use the word identity, if you get your identity mixed up with your ego, that's when you get into traps. So
Mm.
and the freedom is what you pointed to. It's that authenticity. It's just being real. So if I can just admit the reality is I'm going to win and lose, and so my losses I actually just look as learning, just
Yeah.
part of the learning curve. They're examples of lessons. Then I don't really look at them as threats. I look at them as steps towards a destination of my choosing.
Oh, that's really powerful. It's of your choosing. So sometimes even embracing that failure, recognizing I did this and therefore it was a failure. Owning that decision can be powerful as well. For me personally, I would say it's been powerful to say that I failed at that thing, and that helps me be okay with myself as opposed to saying, well, I should have done, I should have done. Well, I didn't, I did. So in the future, what can I take out of that? It is more
Yeah.
powerful because I can't change the past. I don't want to live with regret because I can't change it.
Right, and the self-flagellation is just ego at work anyway. It's trying to preserve the old image and not allowing
Yeah.
you to move into what's closer to reality, the authentic self, so,
That's really powerful.
yeah.
Yes. We still I think though, as you're going through it, as you're experiencing it, it's still really painful.
Oh, of
Is
course.
there any it just hurts. It sucks.
It
Let's
does.
just say it does. It's not fun. Is there any like anything advice you would have for folks that are just like really just in the moment of suffering, realizing it, going through it, processing, and they know that it's just a journey as well. I think that's something else is sometimes when you're processing your failures, it's a journey, but you can't just get over it. You have a business fail, you have a relationship fail, I've heard people say get over it, and after dealing with grief myself, have realized there is no over, there's only through. So even I
Yes,
think in failure, it's not
yeah,
about getting over, it's about going through.
totally agree. Life is a journey, and no matter how long you live, you have more to go. And as soon as you think you don't have anything more to go, your job is basically done, and I don't know why you're hanging around here anymore.
Yeah.
Uh,
Fair, fair.
right? But that agency journey that you just described, Esther, my podcast called Eye of Power, based on a model. I actually just had a brand new version of the model that's new and improved. I'm super
Oh,
excited about.
nice.
But what is agency? What are we here for? What are we trying to do? Why are we upset?
Yeah.
What do we care about? All these things. What can we do? Best I can tell, it comes down to basically a combination of these four things. The first thing is we want to know what's real and true. We want to know what's actual versus sort of fantasy. The next thing is we wanna be connected to other people. We want to experience love. We want to be seen and see others and come together in a communion that allows us to, feel those moments of intense connection. Um, the third thing is we wanna feel like things matter, that there's a meaning and a
Mhm.
purpose, so that things have kind of a structure, and we can call that beauty or harmony. Things have a meaning to them. And then the final thing is efficacy. We can do something. We have actual power to accomplish things. And today it's different than it used to be. I remember a job that was hard that I really liked when a summer job in college was landscaping. And it was hard. You're in the hot sun all day long, sweating, and it was like, you're exhausted by the end. But in the beginning of the day, you had this sort of barren house. And at the end of the day, you have this beautiful,
Yeah,
looking landscaping thing, and that was very satisfying, and it
yeah,
dwarfed the sweat and the tears and the effort of it, and so it's that kind of thing that I'm talking
okay.
about in terms of that dimension, that efficacy dimension.
Yeah, yeah. I appreciate you taking so much time and talking to us and being vulnerable and sharing your failures so that other people can grow. But I do want to hear we also have an opportunity to share a bit about something that people would expect to hear from you. And so I would like to know with your business, The Mentor Machine, you really focus on helping organizations create the culture, create the organizational structure, be the best that they can be. And you've alluded to that expertise as we've talked through this. So my question for that is, how do you know and measure if your team is in alignment? And then what do you do about it once you have that information?
Great question. We've spent a lot of time answering that question, and, I mean, we have our process. I'll say it like this. I wanna start with the big picture, and then I'll get into more of the specific a little bit, but the big picture is this: you wanna develop your people, you want them to be better, more valuable, easier to work with, more energetic and engaged in whatever their role is. All organizations are
Right.
starving and need leadership, great
Yes.
leadership, so
Yeah.
we're always trying to grow leaders, and what does that mean exactly? And there's lots of answers. This is a whole industry, a multi-billion dollar industry to try to
Yeah.
answer those
Yeah.
questions.
Yeah. Yeah. Sure.
And best I can tell, the state of the art on that is you tell people what's good and what's not good, and you might coach them. You might put them in programs. You might have lunch and learns or seminars or webinars, or hire them executive coaches, or maybe give them a
Right.
mentor, that kind of
Yeah.
thing. You don't transform cultures by doing these things. You know,
Yeah.
It's not something that like, wow, it's a night and day difference. So we've been sort of picking at the edges. So, best I can tell, the answer to your question about alignment and everything else is you have to see where people are living as it relates to the topic we were just talking about,
Mm,
where are they focused in terms of what they think matters and why? What are their
mhm,
patterns? What are the things that are holding them in place from their forward development? And what are the
okay.
things that are going to keep them moving forward? Now, here's the thing change is really, really hard.
Yes.
If I want to stop smoking or stop taking drugs or stop drinking, whatever it is that
Right.
people loop that they can't get out of, it's a freaking chore
It's
to try to change
yes.
that. And most things don't work. Now, you get these aha moments occasionally where, something major happens and the person just says, all right, that's it. That
Yeah.
happens. It's possible, but it's not something to plan on. What really works is the small,
Yeah.
is the tiny things that are done over time with
Yes.
support from other people. So it's really the environmental tiny, we call them SIAs, sustained incremental actions, little things that you do that
Yeah.
proves to yourself, rewires your program saying, yeah, I can do
Yep.
something different. You're not trying to stop smoking. What you're trying to do is not smoke a cigarette in the next hour or not buy a pack of cigarettes today or
Right.
right. I'm not quitting smoking. I'm just doing the small things. And then when you do this in concert with other people, your chances skyrocket because you're making a promise to yourself and you're admitting that promise to somebody else. So we work in
Interesting.
triads. The
Oh,
psychology is you're not learning something new. What we do is we install a framework, like a network framework. So in other words, what we've been doing so far, we might equate to talking by walkie talkie. You tell me something, I hear you, I try to do it. I tell you something back, walkie talkie, talk back and
right.
forth. What I'm talking about is more like the internet, where we become like these nodes that are supporting each other. We don't even know what we're doing for each other. The system is just installed that allows the environment to take over and slowly but surely nudge us all in the direction
Yeah.
of more agency and more alignment. How do we know what's aligned? How do we know? Well, we have a rubric that we've developed that is along these lines, both individually and organizationally. So we can see where the spots are, where, okay, this person's not lined here, the organization's not lined here. So we can see where it is that we should start paying attention and apply these sorts of things. And then we install this architecture that's all sort of automated. We shepherd it along, but it's sort of automated system that allows people to constantly move in a more aligned direction.
Excellent. Now that's really fascinating. I appreciate you talking about putting things into incremental steps. I recently had a podcast and we chatted just about that for physical fitness. Sometimes it's not even what you're trying to stop doing, but what you're trying to start doing. And I think that's the same in an organization and with alignment. Like if you know you have cultural hangups in your organization and everyone's not aligned and you're restructuring and realigning everyone, it's the smallest step that you can take. That's what I tell people. What's the smallest step forward that you can take, breaking it down to that smallest piece, because that's where you can find success. You find success, you get that dopamine hit. Okay, I was successful. Well, I can be successful again. If I continue to experience success, I can be successful again, and which outweighs that one little failure. Oh, I didn't do it today. But the next, for
Yeah,
instance,
this is old
with the
this is old
smoking.
knowledge. I mean,
Yes.
Japanese call this kaizen, right? They call this kaizen, and they've done so for
Yes.
centuries. So
It's
it's this is
it's
not
like
a
I know
new
it's like
thing. Yeah.
we think we found it. We were like, "Oh, look at what we found." But it's the application of it. I think that's the hard thing. It's the discipline, it's the ability to do it, it's the taking the initiative to do those things. It's applying it internally into your organization
That's
that's
exactly right.
critical.
Left to our own devices, we really aren't too good at this. That's why it is, and
Mhm.
discipline is the right word. That's why you need a system and you need to do it with other people as a cohort. And that's really what I say is the difference between what we're doing and what has been sort of the standard is we're allowing your people to grow each other.
Yeah.
You're not hiring me to come tell your people what to do. You're putting in a system that allows your people to hold each other accountable as they take baby steps forward.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Right. That's fantastic. Well, I appreciate you sharing. Thank you so much for being on the podcast Unexpected Advice. And if anyone out there is if you're listening to podcasts, check out Tom's podcast, I Have Power. It's really fascinating. I got to be a guest on it. So, of course, you want to listen to that one.
At least that one. No more.
Who doesn't want to hear me talk more? Says no one.
Exactly. Yeah, you definitely want to hear Esther talk. She has a lot to say, and that was a great episode. Enjoyed that. So
Thank you.
definitely
You're
definitely
very
dial
kind.
that one up for sure.
You're very kind. Well, I appreciate you so much being here. Thank you very much, Tom.
Oh, my pleasure, Esther. Thank you.